Hey guys, I wanted to let you know about a project I'm beginning to work on today, Saturday, May 1st, 2021. Throughout this summer, we're going to be analyzing traditional Christian liturgy at Roman Catholic churches, Eastern Catholic churches, Eastern Orthodox churches, and Oriental Orthodox churches. So I want to introduce you guys to what the purpose of this project is, my hypothesis for what I'll get out of this project, and a bit about what you can expect when this project comes to completion. So we have 5 goals with this analysis project. The first goal is to gain a better understanding of valid Eucharistic liturgies outside of my own tradition. So aside from Roman Catholicism, I want to experience more Eucharistic liturgies because they are valid. So we want to understand those liturgies, experience those liturgies, and document those liturgies. And then we're going to compare them all together in a way that doesn't look down upon one liturgy or another, but rather analyzes how they are different while also recognizing their truth that they share. And then, of course, why I'm making this video, and will make another video when I'm done, is to share all of those things with you guys, other people, so that you too can experience the vastness of the one holy Catholic and apostolic faith. So the main reasoning for this comes from Pope St. John Paul II. We're going to go through some quotes from his a letter he wrote called Unum Sint, which is a letter he wrote on ecumenicism in 1995. So he begins by saying that Christ calls all disciples to unity. Believers in Christ, united in following the footsteps of the martyrs, cannot remain divided. Through the celebration of the Eucharist of the Lord, each of these Orthodox churches, the Church of God, is built up and grows in stature. When Christians pray together, the goal of unity seems closer. It is hard to describe in a few words the unique nature of each of these occasions of prayer when the Pope took part in Orthodox liturgies. He continues by talking about how on the ecumenical level, very special prominence has been given to the liturgy and liturgical signs, icons, images, vestments, light, incense, and gestures. However, due to the disagreements in matters of faith, it is not yet possible to celebrate together the same Eucharistic liturgy. And yet we do have the burning desire to join in celebrating the one Eucharist of the Lord, as this desire itself is already a common prayer of praise, a single supplication. And that common prayer being to celebrate the Eucharist together at some point. And he continues, at times it seems that we are closer to being able to finally seal this real, although not yet full, communion. Again, he just keeps on bringing out great lines and quotes. He says, although these Eastern churches are separated from us in Rome, they possess the true sacraments, above all by apostolic succession, then the priesthood and the Eucharist, whereby they are still joined to us in a very close relationship. The Second Vatican Council urges all people, all faithful Christians, but especially those who plan to devote themselves to the work of restoring the full communion that is desired between the Eastern churches and the Catholic Church, to acknowledge that legitimate diversity is in no way opposed to the Church's unity, recognizing that the East has been formed by different traditions and things over several years. And my favorite paragraph from his letter here: in this experience, that is the communal celebration between the Eastern churches with the West, an expression which I have frequently employed finds its deepest meanings. The Church must breathe with her 2 lungs. In the first millennium of the history of Christianity, this expression refers primarily to the relationship between Byzantium and Rome. If we then consider that the salvific event, which took place on the banks of the Dnieper, goes back to a time when the Church in the East and the Church in the West were not divided, we understand clearly that the vision of the full communion ought to be sought, that is, of unity and legitimate diversity. And so what he's referring to, that salvific event, was something about the Rus and their conversion on the banks of that river, and how the church was one at that time, and they celebrated that together. And a millennium after the fact, in 1988, the church, East and West, celebrated the millennium of that occurring together. And so the fact that they could do that was big. So he continues, because we're also going to talk about the Oriental Orthodox Church in this study. He continues talking about the Orientals. We shared the faith handed down from the apostles, as also the same sacraments and the same ministry, rooted in apostolic succession. Today, moreover, we can affirm that we have one faith in Christ, even though for a long time this was the source of division between us. And so now, the moment you've all been waiting for, the 17 churches as of now that we're going to study. Might add some more in here. We're going to go to 6 Roman Catholic churches. 3 of those are diocesan parishes in Ohio, 1 a diocesan parish here in Oklahoma. We're going to a diocesan cathedral. We're also going to go to high and low mass at St. Leo's Oratory, which is the pre-Vatican II the Roman Catholic Mass. Then we'll continue moving onward. We're going to go to 4 Eastern Catholic churches, 2 of those Maronite, 1 in Columbus, 1 in Norman. We're going to go to a Melkite Greek Eastern Catholic Church and a Ruthenian Byzantine Greek Eastern Catholic Church. As for the Orthodox churches, there's 1 here in Norman that I'll be going to, actually, for Pascha tomorrow night, whatever. It's an Antiochian Greek Orthodox Church. There are 2 Greek Orthodox churches in Columbus that we're going to attend, a Carpatho-Russian Greek Orthodox Church in Columbus, and a Serbian Orthodox Church in Columbus that we're going to attend. So 5 Eastern Orthodox churches total, 2 Oriental Orthodox churches, a Coptic Orthodox Church in Columbus, and an Ethiopian Orthodox Church in Columbus that we'll be attending. So just a quick backtrack in church history. The church was one early on after only a few councils. The Orientals split off, or split apart from the tree, not implying that one split off from the other. You know, they would say the Catholics split off, or the Catholics and the Eastern Orthodox. So we all split off at that point, and they're the 1-2 church. But anyways, the church split early on. A little bit later, the well-recognized date of 1054, the East and the West split over time. Some of those Eastern churches have rejoined the West in the form of Eastern Catholic churches. So that's what that means. So how are we going to analyze these, what ends up being 6 different types of Orthodox liturgy, and basically 6 different types of Catholic liturgy? That is Novus Ordo, a low mass, a high mass, and the 3 Eastern liturgies. So 6 different types of liturgies from each side. How are we going to compare these, analyze these together? Well, here's my grand idea. We're going to create this thing called the Liturgical Spectrum. Now, please note, the spectrum does not have bad on one side and good on the other, or correct on one side and incorrect on the other, or valid and invalid, or licit and illicit. It doesn't do that. All that it's doing is ranking something that's a really low liturgy. Think, again, nothing against anybody. This is an ecumenical project. Think like a non-denominational worship session. That would go under extremely low liturgy. There is really no liturgy to it. However, like tomorrow, for example, when I go to Pascha, that's probably going to be on the upper end of this scale, towards high liturgy, very high liturgy, extremely high liturgy, because it's the peak of the Orthodox liturgical year. It's Orthodox, so it's obviously going to be a rather high liturgy service. So that's kind of where it is. And again, I'll talk more about how we're going to come up with this liturgical spectrum. And I'm just going to say it's going to be difficult because I want to be objective, but it's going to be kind of hard to do that. So some things are going to be subjective. I mean, that's just how it has to be. So there's 7 criteria, each criteria 10 points, weighted equally. They are art, architecture, tradition, community, laypersons, choir, and what I'm calling bells and smells. Now, that's not really what it means, but we'll talk about that a little bit. So my hypothesis is that on the low side of the liturgy, although on the spectrum, it's probably going to end up being like a 4 or a 5. Worst case scenario, I'm thinking. It's probably going to be even higher than that, honestly. They're all going to be bunched up towards high liturgy. Because this is meant to potentially in the future take in Protestant liturgy/services as well and place them on the chart. So that's why they'll be bunched up. Like I said, most of them between 5 and 8 is my guess. But anyways, the low liturgy size, Roman Catholic, Novus Ordo, then the Tridentine Mass, Eastern Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, Oriental Orthodox, basically the reverse order of how the churches from when the churches split off from one another is my guess, although I'm probably going to be wrong. So that's my 2 cents. So how are we going to award those 7 different categories? This is probably the most involved of any of the categories and the most objective of any of the categories. So we can get 2 points for stained glass icons and statues. You get 0 points if you have none. 1 if you have a couple there. 1 or 2 or they really aren't that great. You get 2 points if you have a whole bunch of stained glass, or 2 points if you have a lot of icons. 2 points for each of those categories possible there. And 3 points for the altar, the vestments. Obviously everybody has 1, so everybody gets at least 1 point there. Although again, if I were to expand this to Protestantism, there might not be an altar, might not be vestments, so you don't get any points. But again, we aren't doing that on this summer's expedition here. So it's 1 point for not very ornamented, 2 for an average altar, average vestments, 3 if we have like a very elaborate engraved altar and gold stitched vestments or something wild to that extent. But we're going to cap this at 10 points. As you can see, if you can add up, that's 12 total possible points. Architecture is going to be rated on 3 things. Again, it's subjective but also objective at the same time. The structure of the church ideally draws somebody to the altar. It has minimal artificial light. That is, that it uses natural light, stained glass very well, candles included very well. Candles are not considered artificial, so it doesn't use that. And also the sound and acoustics of the building work well. Bonus points if you don't need a microphone and you can talk to a huge church building. That's bonus. Now, tradition, everybody starts out at 10 points, but we get points taken away with time. So I really expect most places to get about 10 points on tradition that we're studying in this study, because I don't expect any of the homilies to go against church teachings. And if it's something that the Catholic and Orthodox are contending upon, I'm not going to count that against their homily, because they're probably preaching whatever they believe, and I mean that's obvious. If people there don't have reverence for the Eucharist, going to lose some points. Failure to treat the liturgy as sacred, lose some points. Any other infraction that I see, going to lose some points. Now, community is the next aspect. This is big. It's really not part of the liturgy, but it's something about the church community and very important to ecumenical dialogue. Because if the community of a parish isn't strong, how the heck are you going to create community between other people? So ideally, I'll be welcomed in either before or after. Say hi. People being friendly is basically what that first point there is. Smiling faces to greet me, maybe not specifically me, but just seeing people there joyous and happy to be at be in attendance that the Jesus Christ made present, that's probably a sense that I'm in the right place for what we're looking for, which is, again, the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ in a whole bunch of different traditions here. I'm looking for a clear sense of cohesion between the parishioners. Really don't foresee this to be a problem in most places, but I assume, especially in the Eastern churches, that most people are going to be very close knit, and as a result of that, they'll be very cohesive. And also openness to visitors, whether it be providing programs, text of what the responses are for the day, etc. Things like that are very good for community, because visitors are of course important. That's part of how we grow the church. Now, lay persons, we're looking for three main things. We're looking for reverent involvement. That is, the lay person actually does something, whether it be sitting there in kneeling or standing or whatever, but not like fiddling around, and are clearly cognizant of what's going on. That's what we're looking for. Clear attention, paying attention to what's going on at the liturgy, and people not going through the motions. You can kind of tell when somebody's going through the motions. Not that that's a bad thing, but if everybody in the whole church is going through the motions, there's probably something going on there. And the next point is probably the most complicated one, and it's the choir, because the role of the choir actually has a sacred role in the liturgy throughout all the churches, and I think it's been unfortunately downgraded to be less so in the Novus Ordo of the Roman Catholic Church. But the choir should have a clear role in the advancement of the liturgy. They should have a significant role in leading, singing, or chanting, or guiding the lay persons in singing or chanting. I might end up giving bonus points to chanting, because chanting is better than singing. Chanting is better than saying things. So we'll see what I end up doing with that. We're also looking for fitting, proper, and traditional instruments suitable to the liturgy. Now, 3 notes on this. 1, a guitar isn't a bad instrument, but you aren't going to get a 10 extremely high liturgy thing if you have a guitar at it. It's pretty hard for you to accomplish that with a guitar. In some way, the guitar is going to detract from the liturgy, and that's just how it is. That's tradition. If you're complaining about that being in the choir section, then I'll put it under the tradition section. So we're putting it under the choir section. 2, similarly, if we're playing an organ, the traditional instrument of the Catholic Church, and the organist does not play this organ well, it also detracts from a high liturgy. And that can affect it just as poorly as the guitarist, even if the guitarist is, not that bad. So again, both of those things, we'll worry about it. I don't expect this to be a huge issue, but it's a thing we're looking forward to. Instruments are not necessary. So if there are no instruments and it's just chanting, like I said, might even get bonus points for that, so long as the human voice is actually well suited to its role. And our last category is bells and smells. This is basically an extra category for anything extra or fancy, or just divine simplicity that makes the liturgy great. And so, the bells, the incense. Incense is huge. I mean, it's arguably the thing that all high liturgies have in common, is that incense is used across the east and the west. Incense is used, and so that's the smells there. Not that you'll lose points if you don't have incense, but you probably will not attain full credit if you don't have incense, because again, there's a reason, a role, a fitting and proper place for incense within the liturgy, and so why not use it? not saying the same thing for bells, but again, it's just a cool name for a category. So as such, it's basically my projection of what the liturgy index for that liturgy will be. So it's nothing really too simple. This is the most subjective of all of the things. So how we'll start is with a picture of the church, the background, the name of the church, the type of church that it is, and then the location in diocese or eparchy that the church is a part of. So here's an example for St. Thomas More. I'll have more pictures, probably too, maybe even like a video tour of the place if I can, drone shots if I can, things like that. So we're looking forward to that. Then I'll move on. Again, this will say at the top the name of the church that it's studying. It'll break down each of the 7 categories. I'll add them all up, divide it by 7 because there's 7 categories, put the liturgy index in the upper corner, and then we'll move on to the next one where we're heading to Maronite Holy Ascension Antiochian Greek Orthodox Church, Norman Archdiocese in North America, and on and on and on. Here, real quickly, are some of the photos. Remember, all these photos are going to be changed because I want to take photos mostly because that way they'll be higher quality and just more representative of some of the things that we're going to be experiencing. So again, some of these churches, very nice, very beautiful, very something to be desired. So all of these will be very, very cool things to check out. So these are the churches, these are the things that we're talking about. And so all of these will be things that I look forward to learning more about over the next several weeks, potentially even months, as I experience different liturgies and hopefully experience different traditions within the big T tradition of the one Holy Catholic and Apostolic faith. I'll see you guys in, a couple months whenever I end up being done with this whole project.